What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Thanks for joining us after a few months back on Eyes Open Podcast, episode number 7. I am joined here today by Luke Voivoda of Ace Business Development, partner, if you will. Luke, what's going on, man?
Ash, thank you so much for having me, man. I'm very excited to be here. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited you decided to say yes for the 10 viewers probably watching this. No, but I'm excited to get into our conversation because you have a crazy story as crazy as it gets for someone in DC, but just a cool background, professional background at such a young age with a lot of accomplishments. I think whoever's watching, whether you're a business owner, entrepreneur, even a student, whoever the hell is watching this video can benefit from this. So tell us about your story, who you are.
Absolutely. I mean, happy to. I can say that from the start, I've been up in this crazy area of the DMV, up around the Beltway. I was born and bred up here. I've been from Ashburn, Stonebridge High School, Virginia Tech, Blacksburg. So again, Virginia through and through, across the board. After school, I ended up moving up here like a lot of other folks did, and went straight into professional sales, if you want to call it that. That was actually my major at Virginia Tech. I was a dual major, marketing, professional sales concentration, and finance, corporate wealth management. And actually the reason I did that was because I'd always thought that I wanted to have my own business. And at the time, I didn't really know what arena I wanted to go into, but I figured that if I knew how to understand financials and reading books, and I understood how to talk to people, that, any industry I went into couldn't be too hard to figure out at the end.
You get a lot with just talking.
Exactly.
And knowing enough numbers.
Exactly. And I'll tell you what, I've definitely milked the knowing a lot by talking for my entire life.
There you go.
But anyway, so I came up into the DMV, and my first job was at a place called Memory Blue. A couple folks might know about that. It's pretty big for starting off your sales game, as they like to put it. And that's really where I found the industry that I have fallen into. It was kind of a happy accident. I went in there actually as a top performer from an internship that I'd had with them, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. I was actually number 1 in the HQ office of Virginia, number 2 across the nation. And so when I came back, I thought I was going to, everything was going to be easy. It was going to go swimmingly. I was going to do exactly what I did at my internship. But come to find out that I was brought in as a top performer to public sector, to GovCon. And I remember reporting day 1 and thinking, what is the government? I'm cold calling the government? Like, what are they doing on my call list? But you know what? Again, I guess every blessing is in disguise, because that was really how I fell into the government area. And I learned, again, maybe in this case, trial by fire, but you do not cold call the government the same way you cold call industry folks. I'll tell you that. Like,
no,
you really
I can
don't.
imagine. Yeah.
So I ended up, really just needing to learn the craft, learn the ways of it. And so very quickly, I ended up becoming successful. I'm happy to report. And in about 3 months there, I was hired out by my client to become an account executive internally. And so for them, I was doing a lot of IT sales, IT product sales, again, within the federal government. And I was deemed the new logo hunter. Of all the sales roles I've ever taken on, I've always been new logo and hunting. So I was at that firm for a while, progressed all the way up to senior account executive, and then actually was poached and transferred over to another firm called River North, where I was the director of business development there, leading IT services and doing all of that as pursuing net new accounts within the federal government. Fast forward a little bit more, and with the market and how it is now, they ended up doing some layoffs, and at that time I was the business development department of 1, and so they ended up taking that function, brought it back internally to the C-suite. They were actually undergoing just a lot of different changes internally too. So luckily it was a very amicable split. But with that, I found myself finding that I needed something else to do in the 9 to 5. And like I said, I'd always thought that, coming and getting into the spot of having my own business was something that I was interested in. And it ended up kind of falling in my lap when my now business partner reached out to me saying, I have an opportunity for you to come in at the ground floor of something, Ace Business Development. And that's where I went, and that's where I am today.
I love it. That is, what a wild ride. What a wild ride, but
Definitely.
Sales through and throughout. So what is Ace business development?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. ACE Business Development, what we do is fractional business development, or fractional sales, if you will, for a little bit of a more layman's term against it. What we do is we come in and plug into an organization's sales process, either to be their sales process or to come in and be a hyper focus on some portion of the sales funnel that's not necessarily working or that could be working a little bit better.
Interesting.
So we come in, again, as I use the term fractional, as basically a 0.5, 0.3, 0.8 resource to augment what's currently happening, whether that, again, be, a more infantile business development department that needs a little bit more help within a certain sector, within a certain area, understanding the lay of the land a little bit more, or it's just, one of those business owners that kind of runs into the too many hats issue.
Got it. So like if let's say I'm a startup, I'm bootstrapping, but I'm starting to get a little bit more traction. I need help. And this is strictly for the government side of it, right?
Right.
So I would call you up. I'd say, hey, Ace, I need some people to make some cold calls for me or to do some maybe like data entry, whatever it may be. Like you're saying that you have people to do that on my behalf.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly, right on. And so in that case, so we actually support both government and industry groups. So we do B2B and B2G, but I myself head up our ACE for government contracting.
Got it. Mr. Partner, the Fed.
Again, I've been in the space. I like to stay in the space. So
you got the harder job.
I would say, maybe I hope my business partner watches this and hears you say that. So, but yeah, that's exactly right. And so with that, there's a lot of different things that I can do to come plug in. And, it kind of depends on where in the sales funnel they want support, right? If it's more at the top of the funnel, if you will, sometimes it's more what agencies are trying to buy what I have to offer. If they are, how are they buying it? And do I need partners that potentially can help me get access to that agency or that can round out a statement of work? So, it's a little bit more of that socialization of the brand or, again, finding leads. Sometimes, there's opportunities that already exist in the pipeline, but they don't know if they're qualifying them properly and they don't understand really the entire composition of all of the opportunities that they're looking at. So sometimes I'm helping with that to make sure they're looking at, again, what they're trying to eat in a year-over-year fashion correctly.
Got it. So like you're pretty much acting like a consultant, but like a sales consultant.
Exactly.
Which, man, generic words, right?
No, but if we're using generic words,
yeah.
Absolutely. Generic words, it really is. It's a sales consultant.
Dynamic,
and sometimes it's strategy, sometimes it's execution, sometimes it's a little bit of both.
Nice. Okay. And how many people are in your organization?
So good question. So really right now there's about 3 of us. There's me and my 2 business partners, and they're great individuals and they work incredibly hard to make it so that we can do what we do. But on top of that, we do have a couple of different 1099s that support us. There's about 3 or 4 of them now that help us with attending networking events, pulling data, again, pulling reports from the government, getting intelligence, and for some of them even doing those cold calls that you mentioned.
Nice. Wow. I might need that to make cold calls on my behalf.
Hey, man, it's a dirty job, but someone's got to do it.
Yeah. So. Yeah. So how do people find you? Like, how have you been getting clients today? Because you guys are how old as a company?
Yes, that's a good question. So as a company, the company's been around for about 1.5 years now, but realistically from the time
very new.
Yeah, very new, and realistically from the time that all of us have been putting in the energy and committing to it like our 9-to-5s, it's been about 8 months now. So.
Nice. Okay.
To answer your question though, for how people find us, luckily I have a good network, and I guess that bodes well for the industry I'm in, right?
Yeah.
But so we network a ton, and the people that are in our network are fantastic. We add them for a reason, I guess, right? And so the amount of introductions that I get from other people, whether it be phone calls, text, warm email intros, is ridiculous, and I always appreciate that. I always have people sending me different events that they want me to go to, either kind of as a favor to them or just something that they think I would find interest in. And whenever I can, I try to get out, as definitely, and as our viewers are going to know, I am not afraid to talk, and so networking events are not too difficult for me. But I would say maybe one of the most interesting ways I'm actually able to find clients is actually through the delivery of one of my offerings, which is that I will go to networking events on other firms' behalf, and what we call that is proxy networking. And so as I'm going around and I'm finding individuals that might be a good partner, maybe a good lead, makes sense to introduce to my client for whatever reason that we've previously discussed, I start explaining to them what I do and why I think it makes sense for me to connect. Through that, it actually gains a lot of interest in folks to say, wow, I am seeing you do this successfully for someone else. What if you did this for me?
So you're networking for ACE, but you're also networking by representing your client. That's one of your BD services that you're mentioning.
It is, and we tell that to a lot of our clients. Is again, you were asking specifically at the top. What is ACE, right? You go data entry or data pulling. What is that? And you know what? Like for the scope of services, that depends on the engagement, depends on the type of outcome we're looking at. But beyond anything else, access to our network, and I think that you and I have had conversations about this offline, which is that it's hard to not have your personal brand and your professional brand intertwined. And so again, I feel like I'm very fortunate enough that with my personal brand, it's strong, and I am always able to bring more people into my brand, get to know me, and then through that I'm able to leverage that through any conversation I'm having. So even if I'm at a networking event for one client in particular, or just out and about and doing something for myself, and I see an opportunity that arises, my network's always in the back of my head. My clients are in the back of my head, and I'm able to plug them in through just other conversations I'm having.
That's awesome. So this is maybe my last question around just more like the lead and the actual business of how you do business. But what are some of so you mentioned the proxy networking is a big component of your services. What would you say from your current client pool? What have they used you for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So to answer it simply,
and sorry, actually, let me interrupt. What are you currently used for, like top 3 services, and what would you like your future clients to use you for if it's different from the current top 3?
Gotcha. Okay, so honestly, what I'm doing right now is what I really like to do, and so I'd love for people to kind of compound on this. But there's a couple of other things too, so I'm happy to talk about those. But what I've really started to get into, and what I'm doing the most delivery work surrounding, is what's called capture. Now, this is a term that's very specific in the public sector and government space, but really, I think the best way to think about it is it's the art of strengthening a deal through intelligence gathering. And the best way to think about that is actually probably to compare and contrast pipelines that maybe you would have, or that a B2B group would have, versus someone in my space and a B2G would have. Think about it like guitar strings, if you will. There's a lot of groups, and let's go to the B2B side. They want as many guitar strings as they can possibly have, as many strings, right? Because to them, it makes sense to have a lot of different deals that they're constantly working on. Well, in the government space, it's not exactly like that. In B2B, you want as many deals as you have. You don't necessarily care how strong all of them are, because if you keep loading the front of the pipeline, some of them are going to get pushed to the end. In government, it's not quite that straightforward. And so what capture does is you only have a couple of guitar strings. You only have a couple of threads that you pull at in a business development, kind of in a pipeline for B2G. And so with that, capture is the art of making those nodes thicker. It's the art of strengthening these maybe limited amount of deals you have in a pipeline so that you can get a higher probability of winning. Again, it is something that exists in the industry side of things, but just not as much, because it's easier to find more opportunities and just continue to load those in at the top. Where in government, there's really only a finite amount of deals that you qualify for various reasons. And so because of that, you need to do everything you can to be at the highest possible chance of winning. And so that's what capture surrounds. That's what I'm doing now. That's really what I like to do. But then also to that point, there's one other offering that I have, and I'm doing it a little bit right now, but what I'd really love to dive into more, which is portfolio and pipeline management. And while that may sound pretty straightforward, it's not the same as opportunity identification. It's about dissecting the opportunity itself and the composition of the opportunity. And what I mean by that is, anyone can make a pipeline. Anyone can fill up something and get a $10 million pipeline. But talk about the composition of that, right? How much work is happening that's the same across the board? So if that business unit somehow went down, are you at risk there? Is it all within the same client? Is it all within the same space? What happens in government? There's these things called set-asides. What happens if it's all leveraged in this one set-aside and you use that? So what I want to be doing is working with firms so that they understand that they have not only a strong portfolio through capture that I can do, but a diversified portfolio with different opportunity characteristics.
Wow. Yeah, that world is so confusing to me, but that makes sense. Yeah, that I feel like that's its own. we could go down a rabbit hole within that.
Absolutely, it's a lot.
So are these clients of yours? How are they committing to you? what's your commitment to them for how long? Like, how long is this scope of service that you're currently doing, and how do you ink that on paper?
Yeah. It's dependent right now. For the different groups that I'm working with, everyone has a deal that's just a little bit a little bit different than someone else's. And the reason that is just because people need different things. And so with that, it takes different activities for me to get them to the end goal. It takes different amount of time for me to execute those activities. So while we've been working to, try to develop as much standardization across pricing out and setting up opportunities as we can, there always is some small nuance to how we can actually ink one of these deals. But realistically, how we actually get these deals in place is multi-month retainers. Whether it be a month-to-month, a 3-month, a 6-month, or a 12-month commitment, we work with them, and we really emphasize the importance of putting in place these multi-month initiatives and these engagements, because business development is not done overnight. When I'm talking to someone and they are asking me how quick I can turn around results for them, I tell them just completely honestly, it's not going to be overnight, because this is one of those things that it's hard. It's a grassroots movement type mentality. And so with them, I really try to explain to them, we are going to be doing these type of activities at, the 30,000 foot view, because that drives into activities at the 20,000 foot view, which drives activities at the 10,000. And as we continually move up and down, kind of that altitude, we are going to get traction and we are going to get results. But again, it's not done overnight. And so really we try to get these multi-month retainers in place where they're paying for our time, so that we can, again, just dedicate the amount of bandwidth that we need to make them successful.
Wow. Okay. And do you do multi-month? Why not year or multi-year?
Well, if someone wants to do a multi-year, and one of the people on the podcast, one of the people viewing today would like to, I have no issue with that whatsoever. So
he also said it's easy. Anyone can build 10 million pipeline. Come on, let's see the money.
And with that too, I think we're always in it for the long haul, and that's what I try to express to my clients, my leads, anyone I'm talking to about this. And I think one way we do that too is we really do try to make our time reasonable. At the end of the day, the 1099s that we have supporting us, we want them to be compensated properly for their time. And for us, we are spending a lot of time and energy putting our blood, sweat, and tears into work so that we can actually get results that we're talking to our clients about. But that all to say that actually in our model as well, we will, again, it's not necessarily a discount, but we are making sure that our pricing makes sense, because what we do on the back end is we have something called performance-based compensation. And so with that, we're aligning ourselves to the success of the client by saying, hey, we are not going to put an outlandish retainer fee in place for you. We're going to put something that covers our time and covers our employees, so that we can do these activities so that you can win. And once you win, we get a percentage of that deal that we had a hand in helping. So again, it's kind of like, we call it performance-based compensation. Some might just call it, a baseline commission. But with that, again, we see that being just a crucial component of our deals, because it allows us to align to their success.
Yeah. For anyone watching too, there's a key distinction what he said for his business, right? They support the client to close the deal, meaning that is true business development versus sales. There's a lot of people who commingle the two terms, and they're completely different, but they're the same but different, right? You have a lot more experience. So what is the difference between, what does business development look like versus sales in the government space?
Right, yeah. And it's interesting, because you're right. A lot of people, kind of flip those words around quite a bit. And even myself, sometimes when I'm just trying to explain to people what I do, I'm like, oh, I'm in government sales. But you're right. I mean, sales and business development is very different. And I think the main thing to think about is business development is a long game. Sales is much more transactional. And that's not to say that, all of our friends that are in sales roles are only thinking about the transaction. They're not. I've met so many great sales folks.
I was in sales. Software sales.
I've met so many great sales folks that, they do exactly what they should be doing. But, in business development, you are working on a very long timeline. I actually got breakfast with someone more recently, and he was telling me that he was entering as the director of business development somewhere. And when he was talking to the CEO, he asked them, how long do you think it's going to take for you? For you, the CEO, how long do you think it's going to take until I start getting results that you're looking for? And the CEO was like, probably about a year or so. And the BD guy said, he's like, no, honestly, think about it as 2.5, because what I'm going to be doing is going to be moving boulders, and that takes a long time. It's not the same as throwing rocks. And, when he told me that, I thought that was a really interesting way to put it. But it's true. You're planting seeds in business development. You're building partnerships. You're looking at things that other people are looking at in a baseline fashion, and you're flipping it on its head 3 times to see, well, how else can we look at this? How else can we connect dots? And so business development is much more long-term. It's much more relationship driven, and honestly, it's a lot of strategy getting put involved in it.
Yeah. And you've been doing all this for a year and a half, so you're still a startup too, and you've accomplished a lot within a year and a half, and technically 8 months of just full time. What all that we talked about was you doing the job, right?
Yeah.
What's it like on the other side of actually building a business? Because 3 people along with 4 or so 1099s, there's the actual get the revenue to keep afloat.
Yeah.
But then there's what are you keeping afloat? Right. So describe that experience of building a startup and how you're seeing it change.
Well, like I said, where people fall into the too many hats problem, I definitely understand that. It's something I'm being cautious of right off the bat because I don't want to fall into that problem. But that said, nevertheless, my day is definitely me going to a hat rack and constantly switching the lens I'm trying to look through. I see really what I do at least into 3 different buckets, and honestly, we could probably delineate it further, but just for my own sanity, I try to think about it in 3 different ways. The first is exactly what you said, delivery work. And in my case, it's really interesting that our delivery work is business development. So that's the first bucket. The second is the business development for my firm. So it's us constantly trying to get new deals so that we can do business development on behalf of other folks. So it's business development for business development. That's a lot. And then for third, it is really the operations of the business, the health of the business. Yeah. What are we doing so that when we bring on 1099s that we're training them properly? What are we doing with our financials to make sure, obviously, that we're compliant, but that also that we're leveraging that in a good enough manner so that we're growing properly? Are we building partnerships properly? Are we talking to business development product firms that we might be able to align with? Doing things that can grow for the business is definitely the third bucket that can be probably the most nebulous bucket because there's just so many things that I could be doing. But again, it's really, for me, it's business development for my clients, it's business development for ACE, and then it's just ACE operations, whatever that may be.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's pretty a lot. So let's kind of close this out a little bit. I want you to be selfish here. I want you to close us out, and by close, I'm we can go on tangents here. I think we still have time. What do you need for your business? If a potential client is watching, what do you need from them? And then the second question I want you to ask, you can look at either camera for it. What do you need for your business, right? Is it more 1099s? Are there people watching that are man, I'm considering BD or sales. Maybe I need a job. Maybe I'm willing to join the company, or hey, I'm a client. I'm interested in your service. Tell me a little bit more about what you need from both personas.
Yeah, no, and you know what? You're right, because there are needs across the board on either persona. So I actually think I'm going to start with the second one that you just said, which is the needs for us right now. So for ACE Business Development, we are growing. We are happy to report that we are growing, we are delivering, and we want to keep doing both of those things. So if there's anyone out there that has thought about sales before, business development, the government marketplace, and is interested in talking about it, please just reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on social media, I'm sure there might be some of my information in the show notes. I am looking to help people get into this market, and not just as a client level, but again, want to bring more people into this space, because I think it's a really interesting space that is not always thought about. A lot of people go into government delivery, and there's nothing wrong with that, but government operations or B2G operations is a very interesting place to be. So anyone who could potentially support ACE in any type of capacity, I'd love to talk with you. And again, that's specifically being more on the sourcing opportunities, the managing opportunities, the closing deals. That's something I definitely need right now.
And I'm sorry, I am also going to say, shameless plug to you here, even if you're not out of college and you've been in the space and have been impacted by the layoffs, take the opportunity and make some money. Use your knowledge, get back in the industry, because I know there's a lot of overqualified people applying to other jobs. Yes, this is a startup, but startups tend to have high potential, high ceiling. You should know that if you're a seasoned person in business development. Take the leap.
Absolutely.
Sorry. And now, what do you need from your clients?
And what I need from my clients, honestly,
Your future clients.
My future clients, my current clients, my current clients are honestly really good about this, which I really commend them for. And this is why I think I'm going to emphasize this point. I need people to come in if they're going to be my client, you have to have an open mind. And what I mean by that is that I'm not an expert in what you have to do. You probably have the coolest thingamajig and the best who's what's it. And I could probably never speak to it in the exact same way that you could. But I also would care to wager that you probably can't talk about contract vehicles like I can. And you probably don't understand necessarily the difference between a hub zone and an 8A contractor. And those types of things are really important if you're coming into the government space. How do they buy? What are their buying tendencies? How do they ink deals? How can you align to the messaging that's coming from them and their strategic plans, or even the administration and what they're releasing? I am not an expert in the industry that you might be having your product or service in, but what I can tell you is that we are pretty darn knowledgeable about the federal government, about the SLED market, and about how they all procure. And so what I need is for folks to come in with an open mind so that I can tell them, I like your messaging here and it probably resonates really well with industry, but at the same time, there's an issue with this language and we're going to have to change it before we go talk to these government folks. Yes, you think that you can do all of this, but this firm, they know this client very well. And if we're able to make it worth their while, they can probably introduce us in and give us a lot more intel than if we tried to go net new. So I need people to come in with an open mind because we don't always have to do everything I recommend. Again, that's why I'm here to advise with strategy and execution, is so that we can have an open and honest dialogue and be collaborative. But for us to do that, I need you to come in with an open mind because you're going to realize that the federal marketplace is an interesting marketplace to be in.
I love it. Now that's a closing pitch. See who you can learn from if you're looking for a job. Good stuff, dude.